Hannah Murray on TRE in the afternoon.
Joining us on the line now is Melissa Hogenboom, who's an award-winning science journalist, filmmaker and editor at the BBC. Her latest book, Breadwinners and Other Power Imbalances That Influence Your Life, gives readers the tools to address imbalances and improve our relationships at home and at work. In the book, Melissa interviews dozens of female breadwinners, stay-at-home dads and same-sex couples, comparing their stories to the latest research to demonstrate the consequences of changing dynamics. Welcome to the show, Melissa.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. This is a fascinating subject. What made you want to delve into it and write a book about breadwinners?
Well, I've always been fascinated about gender inequality, and I noticed something kind of worrying about, amongst young female professionals, either in my immediate sphere of people I was reading about. Often women started to downplay their ambitions and career aspirations right at the time when they were thinking about motherhood or becoming mothers. And I thought, well, we need to look into this because this doesn't make economic sense in a society where many of us are expected to be dual earners and indeed need to be. And then the more I read into it, the more I realized that there's kind of these invisible power structures that influence these decisions. And this can be something so basic as the lack of appreciation for unpaid care work. If someone's doing more unpaid care at home, they have less time to focus on paid work. And as many of us well know, women do the majority of the domestic labor, especially after children, but even before it. And then when I knew I had to write this book, when I came across research that showed that even when women are earning more, so basic economic theory would propose that if you're earning more of the household income, you do less at home, right? That's what we see with male breadwinners. And the same is not the case for women. When women out-earn their male partners, they still do the bulk of domestic work at home. And I wanted to unpick that and understand the consequences of this in personal relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fascinating one. And even in these modern times, you know, I expect a lot of people, both men and women, will have traditional values when it comes to the home life and who should be earning more and who should be doing more around the house. There's a lot of people who still think like that.
It's hugely prevalent. But I think what's even especially interesting in this space is lots of surveys and attitude studies show that the assumptions of what we expect is changing. So men no longer expect to be the male breadwinner, especially among the younger men, but they still feel emasculated when they aren't earning most of the income. And so that's the primary reason why you still don't see those changes at home. So despite on a kind of basic level, we do understand that, you know, women need to be empowered in the workplace. Our gendered expectations and judgments haven't followed suit. I mean, I met, you know, couples in my social network who told me that if the man had stepped back, he felt judged for it and he felt like he lost a sense of his network. And a lot of this is because women kind of are accepted in the workspace, the home space, the school clubs, the mum groups in a way that men are not. Men are accepted in the workspace, but they haven't yet been accepted in the home space as much. I mean, you kind of see those tropes of, oh, daddy's trying, he dressed the kid badly today, or stay-at-home dads who I spoke to said they felt alienated when it came to the baby groups. Or one single dad I spoke to said, you know, the other mums wouldn't talk to him about periods or health issues their daughters were facing, even though he is the primary caregiver for his own daughter. So he knows all these things in and out. So I think it kind of goes both ways. Men feel judged for caring more than working, and women expect to take on more of the care. So it's a bit of a double bind, really. And it holds women back and it holds men back from caring more.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily admit that they had certain views and probably wouldn't even realize that they had certain views, but then would have these biases when thinking of men and women in different roles.
Yeah, and it's more than their own biases as well. Like there's this really interesting research that came out quite recently about fathers requesting flexibility. So fathers who want to spend more time with their children. And so these are often, dads who feel like they want to do their part, they felt that they were judged for it when requesting it, or they noticed that their requests were turned down, or they thought that if they did request it, they would be negatively affected in terms of their career. Women know they'll be negatively affected when they request flexible working, but someone has to do it. And so women expect this negative judgment, downplay their career, downplay their ambitions, and just take it on. And men haven't yet followed suit. So a lot of this is kind of a policy issue. Until workplaces and policy values paid and unpaid care work equally, it's going to be women who continue to shoulder it. And this has, real financial repercussions in terms of earning potential, the pension, pay gap, and just the general pay gap.
Yeah. And with regards to doing stuff around the house, it can be a very interesting dynamic. I've observed this over the years with various friends and family and partners and things, seeing how if the woman is always doing everything in the home, always doing the cooking, always doing the cleaning, all the usual house stuff, there's only so many times, I think, that she'll nag the husband, for want of a better word, and say, please, can you help out? Maybe you could clear up after I did dinner, or can you do the washing up or whatever. And if it doesn't seem to work, and if it doesn't happen naturally, or it ends up in a row or a moan, or then eventually the woman's, or it can be the man, it could be the opposite situation as well. Eventually they're going to stop asking, because it can easily get to the situation where you think, oh, it's just easier to do it myself. And then the other person can feel comfortable thinking, well, I don't need to try anymore, because they're obviously quite happy doing it. And then the dynamic can change totally from there.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly right what you point out. And the nagging is a real issue. And you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said help. Can you help me? When it's seen as helping your partner rather than contributing to the home. I think that's kind of the first red flag. And I think what we need to recognize is often this starts out because women are conditioned and judged for the way the home looks more than men are. And so they often internalize some of these expectations. I mean, I was kind of astounded when I looked into the research and found that even in childhood, girls do more chores than boys. So this is how kids are socialized. And then there's a generational aspect as well. The children that are growing up seeing their moms do more than their dads, they expect a certain role of the woman compared to the men. And it can be really subtle, like who does the organizing. It can be the emotional labor, the mental labor. This is the anticipating and thinking. And the more that you have to nudge your partner to help you, the more resentment it will fuel. So it is worth addressing where some of these assumptions come from, and realizing that we as women often do have higher standards because we're judged, not because men don't see dirt. That's kind of been debunked. And then we have to also worry that we're not gatekeeping certain tasks and have to let go. So a lot of people ask, how can we redress this imbalance? And it has to start with something as basic communication. So rather than being stressed in the moment about why aren't you helping me with the washing up, like talk about it before you move in together, before you have children, divide tasks in the time you have available in a way that feels satisfying. And that's exactly what same-sex relationships couples in same-sex relationships do. They talk about it and divide it because they haven't come into the relationship with the same gendered expectations. So I think it is really interesting that we can change it before it gets to the level where it causes resentment or nagging, because that is kind of a recipe for relationship dissatisfaction and even divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd assume that people would discuss these things before moving in together. The idea of discussing how you'd want to parent your child before you have a child, talk about education, talk about what kind of things you'd expect to pass on to them, how you'd want them to grow up, your views on mobile phone use, all this kind of stuff should be discussed before you do it. Otherwise you can come into some serious problems. And the likelihood before you move in together, you would have spent time at each other's houses. So you'll have some kind of idea whether they're incredibly messy or really, really tidy. And so, yeah, you would have thought that people would have some idea as to who's going to do what before you move in together, to save it being a massive problem or surprise.
You'd think so, but all the research shows that even among egalitarian couples, so couples who self-identify as wanting an equal relationship, and they often set out and say, we're going to do things 50-50, I think they underestimate just how entrenched certain expectations are. And then another added issue is women are the ones who tend to take parental leave. So in couples without children, it tends to be a bit more equal. And as soon as children arrive, it becomes a lot less equal. And so women who are off with the baby take on more of the tasks, and all the evidence shows it doesn't get handed over once they return to work. And so they just know more about the ins and outs of caregiving. And a lot of this work is invisible. And I think that's another issue. It's not just the day to day, it's the thinking ahead, the anticipating, the planning, and eventually the deciding. And another fascinating phenomenon I came across is called the myth of mutuality. And so a lot of the issues in terms of unequal division of labor means that women end up doing more, her career gets devalued, and the couples redefine decisions as mutual. So what I'm saying is, say a couple talks about moving countries or cities for his career, the evidence shows that the partner, who's often the lower earner, will say, oh yeah, we can make that work, rather than saying he can make it work. They're redefining the decision as benefiting them both mutually, because it feels so uncomfortable to say, oh, actually, we're prioritizing his career in the moment. And this invisible labor, this is invisible power, is prevalent in so many relationships, even ones, of highly educated couples who felt that they were doing things equally, because there's such a power imbalance in terms of whose career is prioritized, who has more leisure time. And so that's why it's so important to study it, because these kind of hidden power imbalances dominate even the small and the large.
That's really fascinating. And I'm really interested to learn more about what you found out from interviewing same-sex couples. So are none of these power imbalances there with same-sex couples then?
Of course, there will be power imbalances. And so what's, I think, interesting to compare is in terms of like the time you have available, it's completely understood that the person who has less time because they're working more will do less of the household division of labor, right? They are out the house more, they're often earning more. And then we see that pattern in same-sex couples and heterosexual couples with a male breadwinner. And so that makes economic sense, dividing tasks when you're at home, whereas the person who's at home more is going to be doing more of it when they're the only one there, or that they have more time available. But all the evidence shows that while same-sex couples divide things accordingly and set out these expectations earlier on, and it's much more equal, the same is not true for not only heterosexual couples with male breadwinners, as is been well understood, but even when the woman's earning more. And I think that's where it makes zero economic sense. If she's the one earning the majority or all of the household income, she has less time available mentally, emotionally, and physically to do the household labor, and yet she still does more of it. And that has to change. And I have hope that it will. I spoke to some really inspiring couples who have set out expectations earlier on, communicated better. But it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to feel attacked. It's uncomfortable to, point out that because you're earning, you need your partner to step up, because then you're kind of making, it feels almost transactional, really. And I think that's why people don't discuss it in many cases, especially because evidence shows that out of work men actually have lower mental well-being than out of work women. And so if a man is not the one earning, he's hit with this kind of double whammy of lower well-being and judgment. And so kind of women, naturally would want to protect the man's self-esteem. And same-sex couples aren't beholden to those same sensitivities. Of course, they'll have other challenges, but one couple I spoke to kind of exemplified all the research I was doing. They said to me, if it's even 0.5% difference, the other will complain. And that's despite one of them earning more and being more senior in her career. They both valued the time they had outside of work equally and the time they had with their child. And then they divided the task according to competence and time rather than who was earning more.
It's interesting, isn't it? When it works, when it's a couple that it all works and it seems like they've got everything figured out, they make it look easy, don't they? You can kind of go, so that's how you do it. But for others, it can be a lifelong battle.
Yeah, it can be. And I think it's because we live in such a kind of almost polarized society where on the one hand, we are more connected on digital front than ever, but we lack a village. And so when women are able to socialize in terms of, especially when they have children, they kind of find this village more easily than men. And so if the man is the one doing more of the childcare, he's just more isolated, then he might face extra judgments from his parents because he's not working. So one female breadwinner couple I spoke to, she told me that although they are both happy with their setup, he loves, being home with their child. He hadn't built up a professional identity or career the same way that she had. So they actually decided he would be the one spending time with their child. He still faces judgment from his own parents. And she even says her friends kind of judge him and say, why isn't he earning a bit more money? Can he help with that? And so it's really challenging when someone perceives you in that way. And it's really disempowering. All the kind of psychological evidence shows if you feel disempowered by someone's judgment or opinion of you or the power they have over you, it causes stress. And when you're stressed, your communication suffers, you have higher cortisol, it's kind of measured in the brain. And so it has all these kind of negative knock-on effects. So I think it's a societal conversation we need to have where we value care work and we value either person who does it. And we need to understand that in order for anyone to progress in their careers, you have to support each other, give each other the autonomy we need, and carve out equal leisure time as well. Yeah.
And with housework, you'd think it just comes down to common sense and a bit of care and understanding. I mean, I'm incredibly lucky that my husband does all the cooking. He's a great cook and he loves cooking. So he literally does all of the meals. And he's actually really good around the house in general, to be honest. I'm extremely lucky. I mean, if he's made the food, more often than not, I'll clean up afterwards because I think, well, he's made the food. So again, it's just being kind. It's thinking, oh, well, they've done that, so I'll do that. And it's being a unit. It's being a couple and being supportive to each other instead of having the attitude of, I don't need to do it, they'll do it, or just not even thinking about it at all, walking into a room that's incredibly dirty and then leaving it again. Just the idea of this surface is dirty, I think I'll clean it, or this floor has got stuff in from the garden, it needs to have a sweep. It's just being observant and doing something about it instead of ignoring it.
Yeah, and valuing each other's time, because if you're not doing it, someone else has to. Yeah, and I think that causes a real issue. But absolutely, and I think knowing what's important and making sure you can adapt your needs accordingly is just such a fundamental aspect of kind of a balanced relationship, and we don't do it enough. And one of the issues tied to that is we equate power and status with money. And so there are situations where men feel like because they're earning the money, they don't have to do the unpaid work and the housework, or they come in and they're like, well, I've done a whole day of work, I can relax now. And the old parody is a woman's job is never done, or as the man comes home and he feels like his work's done. And that's feels like a very 50s outdated view, but it's so prevalent still today in kind of all income classes as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And like so many of these things to do with relationship, all comes down to communication.
It really does. Communicating shared desires and needs, understanding your own goals, understanding kind of ambitions and carving them out. And if you look at, earning potential, it's so important to have these conversations, because the more a woman is stepping in and doing more of the kind of labor, the less time she has for her career. And so I think this is especially damaging in female breadwinner couples. A huge study showed that there's a female breadwinner well-being penalty. That sounds a bit wordy. What it simply means is that when it's a female breadwinner who's earning more of the household income, she's actually earning less comparatively than a man would in the same position. And that's in line with the gender pay gap. So you can imagine that would occur. And so if you're earning all the household income, you're still doing more at home and you have less time to focus on your career, you're kind of stuck. And I think because there's so many precarious industries right now where men are losing jobs and women are as well, but in a way that maybe wasn't the case. And when you had one career and you worked it your whole life, all the evidence shows that we're going to confront this kind of dynamic more often than not, even if it's just for a temporary amount of time. So I think we have to understand that we shouldn't equate our worth and our value by what we're earning.
And getting those expectations out the way at the beginning, I think it's really important for people to, in a relationship, to understand what each other's expectations are, because that's where it can all go horribly wrong. You know, if the woman is expecting the man to be the breadwinner or the man is expecting the woman to do all the work in the house, but the other party feels totally different, then you've got an issue, haven't you?
Yeah, you have. And I think people don't have those conversations. And I think on one aspect of this is women often do expect the ones to be the ones that do it. Like I hear a lot of my female friends saying, well, he won't do it to the standard I do it, so I will just do it. Or if they've got people around, they are like, well, I'll clean up because he won't do it like I do. And that's kind of, it's called gatekeeping. Of course, it's got a term. But women do that because of that judgment they face in the same way that men don't. Like there's a really hilarious study where people were given a photo of a room and they were either told it was Jennifer's room or John's room, and the room looked exactly the same. And if it was Jennifer's room, they attributed her character as worse than if it was John's. So the women were literally being judged on their personality in the same way that the men were not. And so you can see why women then internalize it. So often they don't even realize that's going on. Men might not understand why it matters more to women. And they might say, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters to her. And kind of that's a very basic understanding, but you can apply that to a job or your career. Like what matters to you might differ. And if there's a cognitive dissonance between that, it causes stress. And so then you end up in that vicious cycle. And so I think valuing each other's mindset, opinions and ambition in all aspects of either the workload, how you raise your children, or what you want out of your career, it is so important. Otherwise you can kind of get lost in it. And you see that happen, especially to women.
Yeah. And things obviously can change throughout your life together as a couple. The man could be the breadwinner and then he could lose his job. And that again can change the dynamics massively. And then suddenly the woman is the breadwinner. And as you mentioned earlier, that can be quite emasculating for a man. And he might feel really uncomfortable with the woman earning the money instead of him. And, you need to reassess everything when that happens, because the dynamics can, of course, totally change.
Yeah, and that has happened. That happened a huge amount during the financial crisis in 2008. And what happened was men who lost their job redefined their status as more likely to be ill or unemployed than a caregiver for their children, even if they were the caregiver for their children. So they were so uncomfortable with that identity, they found another way to kind of talk about their situation. And that it's because feeling disempowered financially has such a hit on your sense of self and your sense of status for men more than women, which is a massive issue. So there's another couple I spoke to where they were earning roughly equal for a long time. He was the higher earner. Then it turned out that she became the higher earner, but she was still the one that the school called. She was still organizing all the lunchboxes, and it got to breaking point. And she said the only thing they could do was they sat down and had a conversation. And she felt that it was so obvious what she needed. And when she spoke to him about it, he said, well, I'm doing so much more than my dad did before me. So he hadn't realized, he felt like he was a very active dad. He felt he was maybe more of a present dad than others in his social circle. But because she was out earning so much more and out the house more, she was, in a really high flying career, she just wasn't able to do the organization of the household. So until they had that conversation, that's the only time things changed.
Yeah, because again, unless you talk about it, some people, whether it's men or women, we're talking about men in this instance, but some husbands might not have a clue how much the woman is doing for the children in terms of organising, planning the trips, the lunch boxes, all this kind of stuff. But if she's always done it and it's always happened and it's always been her job, if you like, he might have no clue all the different things that she's doing unless she points it out to him or says, it'd be great if you could do some of this because I'm always doing that or whatever.
I mean, exactly. There's no way my husband is ordering the kids' swimming costumes in May because I know if we order them in July, they'll be out of stock, or ordering the next shoes up because they're on sale and I just happen to think about it. Like, this is in my brain every day. I'm always thinking ahead. And his attitude is, well, you don't need to think about that yet. But it's so ingrained in me because I've always done it. Yeah. And it is really hard to let go. I write about this for a living, and yet I still do, I'd say, the majority of the mental load from kind of the small, mundane things like, what are the kids going to eat tonight? I mean, the book launches this Thursday, and I've already thought ahead about what the kids will eat because I want them to eat before the babysitter turns up. I'm already thinking about secondary school, even though it's only 3 years away. And you can be sure that my husband isn't thinking about it, or he thinks about it when I talk to him. Yeah. And that's what all the evidence shows, because they help making the final decisions. They feel like they're an equal voice, but actually that's missing all the steps of anticipating, researching, identifying the needs. And those are all mental steps that we can't, let go of and we take with us to work. And it's not until we kind of step back and hand tasks over that they actually can kind of step up to do it more. So I'm always really careful to say that it's not a man's fault that women internalize a lot of this stuff, because it happens from so young, but they can help us hand things over. So taking away every aspect of the planning for a few activities a week, or taking on the food shop and the cooking, but it has to be end to end. It can't just be, I'll cook one time this week, because then they don't know what's in the kitchen or what they need to buy. It has to be kind of knowing what stock you have, knowing how to whip up a meal quickly, not spend 3 hours cooking, which is what's happened in my household. And I try to be so grateful, but then I'm the one doing the childcare. And so it's a delicate balance. You don't want to demotivate each other. And it can happen both ways, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's a fascinating subject. Well done for exploring it. If people want to get a copy of Breadwinners, it's available now on our website, TRE.radio, and it's by Melissa Hogenboom, who we've been chatting with today. Melissa, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.